Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Real Talk with Ryan Madrid. Thank you to VIP Mortgage once again for letting us do this podcast in this awesome room here. I did look at new tables, by the way, for you two back there. So,
cool.
Yeah, we need new tables. Thank you to Trey for doing the podcast engineering, and then to Trisha Madrid, my sister, for doing the podcast production, amongst many other things. So, our podcast isn't a podcast just about real estate. It's a podcast about people doing big things in town here in Arizona, and entrepreneurs, people obviously in the real estate business, but from anything from restaurateurs and, you know, anybody who just doing something, and people that I know.
Nonprofits.
Nonprofits and stuff like that. But ideally, it's always great for me when I have people on that I'm friends with, which happens quite a bit. So, our next guest is another one of my college roommates and best friends from a long time ago, Max Hansen with Y Scouts. Thanks for coming, Max. Appreciate it. It's been a while trying to get you here.
Thanks for having me. It's been very good accommodations today. I've been in the office for the last 3 hours, and this setup that Trish and Trey have is amazing. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Max has his own podcast as well. What's it called?
It's called the Built on Purpose Podcast.
Built on Purpose Podcast, and it's audio only. So that's not a problem. That's fine. So do you remember when we first met?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Tell that story then.
First time we met was in a Jack in the Box parking lot. And the reason why we met is I went in there to get some food with another guy. I don't even remember who the guy was.
Me neither.
And some guys came up to me in the parking lot, and they were kind of talking smack, and talking smack.
Yeah.
So I went to the party that my brother happened to be at. Usually he didn't let me go to the same parties as he went to in high school, but this one I was. So I told him about it, and I said these guys were, starting shit with me, and he had been drinking with a bunch of other friends. So they decided they wanted to go fight these guys at the Jack in the Box parking lot. Yeah. So we show up, right? Mm-hmm. And then there was probably how many people there? Because I don't want to exaggerate. I mean, I remember there being
five.
Five?
Yeah.
I mean, total. Like the group.
Well, your guys?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't even lot.
Yeah. Yeah. There
Trucks came just roaring through the parking lot, and just.
There were like 20 people. 20
yeah.
plus.
And there was 5 of us.
So my brother squares off with this other guy who.
Travis Thompson.
Yeah. 2 big dudes.
Big fellas.
Sam's got his head shaved.
Yeah.
And they're ready to fight, and I meet Ryan. Ryan's just calmly sitting on the sideline. And he looks over, and we just start having a normal conversation while these guys want to kill each other.
Yeah.
And so that's where our relationship started.
And this was when you were still in high school?
Oh, yeah. I was. My brother was a senior.
Were.
He was about to go off into the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy.
So he had just shaved his head like the day before, too.
Yeah.
So, and he was big boy at that point.
So I must have been a sophomore, and Ryan was a junior.
Yeah.
What were you both doing at the same Jack in the Box?
I was with the other guys. And we walked in, and they knew him somehow. I didn't know how they knew him. And something so juvenile. It was like you said something bad about the football team or something like that. I don't fucking remember.
Because Max went to a powerhouse high school football
exactly. But
no, actually, that's probably why it started. Because I went to a small Catholic school.
Yeah.
So I had to go poach and date girls in normal schools.
Yeah.
And that was the thing that probably started it.
Probably.
How funny. I thought you guys met in college.
Well, we only met that day, and then I never talked to him again. And all of a sudden, I was in my fraternity in college, and another guy that was in our fraternity was his friend, and he was there. He just popped in, and I was like, "Did you remember that meeting me that night?" So there you go. Then we moved in with each other 6 months later. So yeah, just another one of the Northern Arizona University graduates that's killing it in business and his personal life as well. So. So I don't want to get too deep into our like pasts and relationships and all that sort of stuff, because people have heard enough about all of our antics and shit. But I want to talk about when you graduated from college. You went to, so right now obviously Y Scouts is a recruiting firm for everybody who does not know that. But you went to work for Aerotech, correct?
I did. I was when I graduated NAU, I was very dead set that I didn't want to stay in Flagstaff. Because I'd seen people get stuck there, and they're 5 years out of college, they're still in Flagstaff. So I immediately moved to San Diego, moved in with my brother, and I was going to get a job in San Diego. I interviewed for a few jobs, I didn't get them. Bo Lump, one of our other friends from college, called me and said he had a job opportunity for us in the staffing business for Aerotech. So I came back from San Diego, interviewed in Phoenix, and then ended up moving, getting the job and moving and starting at Aerotech and working there for 2 years.
And then from Aerotech, you went to you started your own company.
Actually, from Aerotech, I went. It's kind of funny when I look back. And from Aerotech, I went to work for this small staffing company. I won't even mention their name. Real small company.
Yep.
But it felt like I was on an aircraft carrier, and I jumped off, and I was like in a dinghy in the middle of the ocean.
Right.
And I think I took it for like $10,000 more base or whatever it was.
Right.
But I did learn a lot. It helped me figure out a few things. And the company that I worked at, again, it's not important, but I didn't like the way it was run. And it was also, that's when 9/11 happened. So I had been fighting to be put in charge to like run this company, because I thought I could do better. I thought I could apply the stuff that Aerotech taught me, which were some wonderful things, to this small company called Hunter Technical.
You just did it.
That's okay.
You said it.
Are they still around?
Yeah, they're still around. I think. But so they finally did put me in charge, but then 9/11 happened. Mm-hmm. And then they were kind of like wondering why things weren't getting better. And they didn't understand, how significant 9/11 was. So it really put me against the ropes. So I just eventually just said, listen, if I want to start a company and I want to run it my way and build the culture my way, I'm just going to start my own company.
Right. And it's kind of crazy too, because when you did that, like you weren't really like polished and professional and knowing how to run a business, and you really had to figure it out and do everything on your own and learn everything on your own.
Oh, I knew nothing.
Yeah.
In fact, that was the best thing that I knew, is that I knew nothing.
Yeah.
The way I started the business, I think is pretty interesting, because the business that I started is still successfully running. Ryan Newes was my partner, but he worked at a competing firm 2 buildings down. And we just said, hey, I met him one day, and he said, hey, he would want to start his own company one day. And I said, we knew nothing about starting our own company. Mm-hmm. I said, why don't we start meeting regularly and start talking about starting our own company? So we started meeting, I don't know, every couple weeks. And he had a client that happened to ask him, like, hey, how many people work for you? And it was only a couple. And he's like, why don't you just work for yourself? So Ryan shared that information with me, set me up with Carl Towner, which was one of our founding partners. Yep. And then we ended up starting
He was kind of the money guy behind getting it rolling.
Yeah, he was the money guy behind getting it rolling. But it was a kind of a surreal thing after I met with him. I'm like, shit, I'm starting my own company. But I didn't know a lot. And that was the thing that I will look back on. And I'm glad I didn't think I knew a lot, because I went for a lot of help, joined EO, did a lot of things that really helped me figure out how to start a business. And then really started to meet a lot of other people that were running their own businesses successful, and started learning from them.
I think there's 2 good points here. So don't always take a job because you get a raise. Don't always take a job for more money, because it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the right thing for the future. And this industry is known for people jumping ship all the time for taking bonuses or taking a sign-on bonus or whatever, because that doesn't mean everything, right? So this is a great conversation, because we're going to be getting into the whole staffing model. And I think we had a pretty cool conversation at lunch. Stu and I were asking, because we're going through some stuff right now too, right? So I want to talk about so you started Job Brokers with Ryan.
Yep.
Right. And I basically saw this whole thing happen, right? And then all of a sudden, you had this like passion project, really. Like you read What's Your Why by Simon Sinek. And if I made this up at this point, this is what I've been living with like the last 15 years in my mind. Because I remember you were like so like amped about about What's Your Why. And that was basically when it came out, right? You were like on the forefront of kind of like when he was just super popular. And you started like mapping out this whole new like Tom Cruise, like what's it called from that movie?
The Matrix?
No, the movie where he quits a job and
Jerry Maguire.
Jerry Maguire.
Oh my God,
yeah, Jerry Maguire did
his
right.
manifesto.
His manifesto. He's like, I'm gonna do this everything based upon like putting people together for the right reasons, right? Is that wrong or no?
No. There's some truth to that. I mean, I think Simon Sinek was like kind of along the path, but I think the way that I remember it and the way it happened real time was I just wanted to be an entrepreneur when I first started Job Brokers, which is ironic because the word job and brokers are not something that people really seek out in this day and age. I mean, people want a little bit more meaning than job and having a broker involved. But so all I really wanted to be is financially free and be an entrepreneur. And in Job Brokers, we did that. It started out relatively slow because we started January of 2002, which was in the wake of 9/11. So I remember how significant that was at the time, because a lot of the stuff that we did in that prior or smaller company was like aerospace manufacturing. All that shit was just shut down.
Right.
I mean, it was literally at a standstill. So to start your own company in the midst of that was pretty significant. And it ended up obviously working out. But it was, but when I started, I wasn't worried about like what, the culture necessarily that I was going to build or the type of meaning that I'd have in my career.
Right.
So we did a lot of contract to hire work and stuff that, started to wear on me a little bit over time. And where I started to kind of question, I almost had to lose my own purpose. In fact, I remember, I don't know why I remember this so vividly. I remember we were probably doing at the time probably $30 million a year. So we were in like 2008, 9. And Maxwell was maybe 5 or 6 years old. And I remember this because he was with my nephew, who's a year older than him. And I was at home working from my desk. And they walked up to me and they asked me what I did. They said, "What do you do?" And I said, I put people to work. I find people jobs. And these, 2 little boys are like kind of looking at me. And keep in mind, my nephew's dad is a police officer. So he drives a police car. These are young boys. They know what he does. And so I told them, I put people to work. I find jobs. And they said, no, what do you actually do? And I said, I meet with people and I talk with them on the phone. And they looked at me and goes, "That's all you do?" And they walked out. And I was like, holy shit. And you have to keep in mind at the same time, I was kind of thinking about like, what am I going to be known for?
Right.
And most of the work that we did, and bless the souls that do this, was contract to hire, where you're basically hiring people into these, kind of more volume.
Like welders and
some of them were welders. So this was like even University of Phoenix, like enrollment people. And we would hire thousands of those to have some stick. And that was the model, that contingent model that some companies use. I'm not knocking that.
Right.
But when you're doing it and you're making millions of dollars off it over time, after a while you start to question, like, am I really fixing the root of the problem?
Yeah.
So that's why I started questioning. And then, in all honesty, we had some workers' comp issues. And when people started to get hurt, that's where it started to really wear on me kind of ethically. And so the combo of, kind of the high volume and a high turnover, where it felt like we were just throwing people's, like, I'd get several thousand W-2s a year of people, like partial W-2s. So it felt like we were kind of throwing people in our wake, trying to fill these jobs. And then every once in a while, there was receivables issues, because you're basically loaning people money to pay your employee, and then they pay you the markup on top of that. And then the workers' comp. So it was like it was a whammy of 3 things.
Right.
It was those 3 things. I was just like, you know what? I don't know if I want to be known for this. I don't know if this is what I want to be known for when my son gets older. So.
Right. So when did this? Because you were still with Job Brokers when you started Y Scouts, right?
I did. In fact, I would give a lot of credit to the situation that we were in, because we were doing very well. Me and my business partner was kicking off a lot of cash.
I remember.
And so we got to start this. And Brian Moore, this is where Brian Moore enters the picture, which he was on a prior podcast. He's amazing.
Brian Moore with Anthem.
Yeah, he's an amazing dude. So I hired him. He was at PF Chang's. He was miserable. He was working in their corporate office, and it was just misery. It was like a corporate misery. And he called me a couple times, like most people do, but I didn't know he meant it. So finally one day he's like, "I got to get out of here. Like, let's do something." So we hired him at Job Brokers as the VP of Growth, I think was the title, something growth. Mm-hmm. And so when he come on board, he just reviewed everything that we did, and both of us kind of went through and said, what can we build that would be different and better? And I would credit the fact that we were so successful with the other businesses that gave us the time and the energy and the space to really not have to worry about making money, which is really something that you don't normally get. When you start a business, you have to make money. So we were able to like kind of test some things that we can talk about before we really even had to make money. The funny thing was, I remember the office setup is we had the Y Scouts team. There was like 4 or 5 people on the team. And then we had the rest of the Job Brokers team that was just crushing it. I mean, we were just like, we were just driving revenue like crazy. And they just kind of it was like oil and vinegar. I mean, they just kind of clowned us and made fun of us. And it was like, they even made comments like, joking around, like, "Are you going to join the dark side over there?"
Yeah.
Because we were up to this like more meaningful work. And they made fun of it like, "When are you guys going to actually make some money?"
Right.
So
it did take a while. Because I remember there was even times it's like, I mean, you basically, the revenue you got was to pay the salaries of the people that were working there, if you even could do that. I mean,
Yeah, it took a while. I mean, we were, again, with my other business partner, Ryan Newes, we didn't even separate the EINs at that point.
Yeah.
We just said, hey, this is just a R&D project. And so we were lucky that we started that way. And then when we separated it out, it was a stark, you could see the stark difference of like the money not being made on one side and the money being made on the other. Right. But it did take a while. The whole concept of, which seems weird, of hiring people around purpose and values back then in 2012, this was 2011, 12, was like foreign. It was like talking Chinese to some people. And people, you really needed to explain the concept to people. We don't even need to explain the concept anymore. Like everybody gets, it's like table stakes that you need to build a great culture around purpose and values in this day and age.
Yeah, I mean, back then, like you said, really, it was just kind of getting rolling. The whole personal development wasn't like it is today. I mean, today it's just so big and everybody understands like that is the way to go. So you were like a little ahead of your time, maybe a couple years, and then people started catching up, and obviously that's the reason why you guys are successful now. But so the why in Y Scouts, does that have some? So it is part of what's your why or no?
Yeah. Okay. So we actually federally we had the name What's Your Why. And Simon Sinek called us one time to talk about it. I think he just was inquisitive.
What?
Like, you have this federally registered. Like, how did you end up with this? And so we were friendly about it. He was very, very nice. But the Y Scouts, the way we came up with it, Brian and I were, obviously looking through building this business. And the letter Y has like the fork in the road, like the Y.
Yep.
It stands for the question why, like you're insinuating. There's also this thing called X and Y theory. X theory is that people only do things for money. Y theory is that they do it for intrinsic reasons other than money, which you can read more. It's been around since like the 70s. And then the word scouts, we did a word cloud with our 10 biggest competitors, who we thought at the time were our 10 biggest competitors, which aren't really now. Hindsight 2020. And in their websites, they didn't have the word scout on any of on their site anywhere. And we always thought that a good leadership search firm would be able to identify a leader sooner than anybody else, kind of like a scout does in professional sports.
Right. Nice. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about like the whole, like the background behind Y Scouts and like what made you guys different with like just the database and like looking for people to mostly matching people with the right job before they even, or career, right? Before they really even knew what the career was or the firm knew? Yeah.
So the first that we were trying to address the problems in the current hiring model. And I think where the problems began were with the job boards, which was coincidentally Brian Moore worked for Jobbing, which was one of the bigger job boards, at least locally and regionally. And the problem was that job boards and the internet got so good at posting jobs that it allowed everybody to basically apply to everything. And so it took away the ability to separate, candidates from one to the other. And then furthermore, candidates started to understand how it worked, which was it does keyword matching. And if you have enough keyword matches, it puts you to the top of the stacks that these HR people are using. So people were basically gamifying the system, rewriting their resumes, and sending it in. They'd read the job description, put all the keywords in it, send it in. And then people were interviewing, and the interviewers, the hiring, the people on the hiring teams, they would be so disappointed because they would hire somebody who said they could do all these things, and they'd hire them, and then they couldn't.
Right.
So as a hiring professional, all of us that were in the hiring world or still are, we looked at it a little bit different. We didn't, instead of complaining that like people lie in interviews, like what are we supposed to do? Like these people need to quit lying. Mm-hmm. We just decided let's just set up a process that's different and prioritize that people want to work for a purpose and they want to align to values. So that's going to be important in this equation. So we did that first. And the way we did that first is we never post jobs. We still don't post jobs today. I mean, there's certain ways we do, but the reason why we don't is when we reach out to candidates, we take them through a discovery process to learn more about them, their purpose, values, and kind of just, cultural aspects before we tell them about the role. And that just allows them to be authentic. It allows them not to worry about gamifying. It allows them not to, try to tell you what they think you want to hear.
Yeah.
Because when you don't give the answers, or when somebody doesn't understand the company and the role and all the details behind it, they just default to telling you the truth. So we just took that to, took it to the nth degree, and we still do that today.
So did you guys create your own like disc profile sort of thing or something like that? Like how do you ask them, and then how deep do you go into their personal lives? like, to find their values? Like, give us an example.
Yeah, no, it's good. So one of the first questions we always ask in discovery is, what do you most care about? And that's a pretty big question. And usually almost everybody says personally or professionally. And you just say both. And then they just basically tell you everything.
Right.
And you can like prod them a little bit. So it's 30 minutes of them telling you. We also
so it's a phone call.
Yeah,
or
it's a phone call.
Okay. So they're not filling something out.
They can do it online too. But most it was originally made and still done today over a phone call is the way it's most effective. And then we talk about like what values would you never compromise. Things like that. Just what's most important and what's a strength. What are the things you like to do? And all these things are really different and better when they don't know why you're asking it, because they just feel free and they just let you have it in a good way. So we still use that discovery process today.
Yeah, Trish.
So Max, are there any particular standout, like bizarre answers, like anything that kind of made you just go, what? Or most people?
Not really. I mean, I think what stands out is when somebody doesn't, like when they're like, they're confused as to why you're asking them those questions. And quite honestly, no offense to those people, but all they care about is a paycheck, like exchanging time for money. Mm-hmm. And what we're interested in is aligning on a lot deeper levels than that. So if they're not, if they are like, why am I doing this? Just tell me what the job is. We're kind of like, well, then you're not the right person for us and our clients. So, and no offense to them, but that's just kind of how it works. But yeah, I think those are the things that stand out is when they get combative, like why are you asking me this stuff? Like, why does this matter? Then clearly we just kind of move on, like we've got the wrong person.
It's a nice way to weed people out.
It's a great way to weed people out, yeah. And all of our clients, especially now, I feel like we're standing on the shoulders of giants at Y Scouts. Just the brand has built itself up. All of our clients, they do business with us because of what we stand for. And that's what we stand for, is aligning people on deeper, on depths that are far beyond just exchange of hours for pay.
Are there a lot of other like staffing companies that have like of your guys' like level that do the same sort of thing? I mean, there's got to be some other ones, correct? No?
There are some. What's interesting about it, Brian and I, I could go on for hours about this, but I'll try to.
Brian or Bryna?
No, Brian Moore.
Okay.
Brian Moore and I, so we, what was the question? Repeat that. Sorry.
Are there other companies?
Yeah. So we when we started this, we put in, him and I, when we were in a think tank about this, we put in purpose-based recruiting and hit enter into Google. And we were in a conference room and like nothing, like the boys club came up or something.
Right.
Boy Scouts came up like first. We're like, holy shit, did you misspell that? So we were like, hey, we're first. We're first to market here. Like we have first advantage, first moves advantage. And so we were the first one, only ones doing it. But like overnight, once we gained some momentum, all of a sudden, like Heidrick and Struggles, which is one of the biggest retained search firms in the world, they put on their website that they're purpose-based recruiters too. So they just overnight, like everybody was purpose-based recruiters. And I'm not suggesting that we caused all of it, but we worked this up so much that we're like, oh my God, we're going to dominate because we're truly, we're hiring around purpose and values. We were, that we know of, and we've looked pretty hard. We were the first purpose-based recruiters on the planet that really talked about it like that. Purpose-based leadership search is what we say, or purpose-based recruiting. But all the other firms, I don't know of many. I mean, a lot of the other firms that were really good sound at hiring senior level leaders, they started digging into more cultural aspects of the companies they were working with, which started to be more in our world. But
it could have organically happened in some fashion, but you probably maybe just give them a little push.
Yeah. I think so.
Yeah,
I think so.
Which is fine. Are you friendly with any of those people that like run those other companies?
Not really. It's a pretty competitive world. I've become more friendly. Like when I was younger, because of playing sports and stuff.
Yeah.
I would say I was like in Aerotech, like they wanted to scare the crap out of anybody that worked for them. And I think they kind of still use that tactic. Like they would sue you if you go to work for somebody else and do the same thing. So that was kind of drilled into me a little bit more than it should have. Now I'm a little bit more friendly. Now we're lucky enough where we get so much work coming at us that I have created, friendly alliances where I can refer work to. So they're basically friendly competitors. Because I've learned, you have to. We can't service everybody.
Yeah. So What was the account that kind of led you to believe, like, okay, we're on to something, and this is actually going to work? Do you remember who that is?
The one account?
Like the first account where you're like, oh, finally, we got it.
Oh, yeah, I do. There's one time. So that discovery process that I'm telling you, and it doesn't always happen like this. It's not a direct line like this. But so I was training a new employee on this account, and it was a COO or a VP of Ops role for a drug treatment center, like a really high-end drug treatment center. It's these big houses up in North Scottsdale. And so we were interviewing these people, taking them through discovery. And I remember I was at Arizona Country Club, and the gal that was training was with me. And I was interviewing this guy that was running five. It wasn't. I mean, not even trying to look, but he was running 5 payways, and so he knew how to run, the facilities and the food and like the ops and like the facilities. Yeah. So we said, hey, if money wasn't an issue, what would your dream job be? What would you do? And he said, well, my brother played professional baseball. He hurt his knee, blew his knee out, had to, to have surgeries. He got on pain pills. He got addicted to pain pills. He's like, I'd love to work at a drug treatment center. We were just I looked at the gal next to me. I mean, never does it happen. I mean, that's like pure alignment. But we're like, holy shit, this is amazing.
Right. Serendipity.
So that was the one when you talk about like that. That was the one where I was like, whoa, this is crazy. So that ended up happening, and I'm not pitching that this is going to happen this way, but this guy had an offer to run all the Garcias for like $350,000, and he ended up taking this role for I think less than $200,000 our base, because it was worth it to him. He didn't pay. He was an newly empty nester, and so that was the time where it like really was like, this is the power of like getting somebody that is really aligned to the purpose and meaning of a business,
right? And
how much more valuable that is than money.
Is it the company that's right over here?
No. The guy that was running the business, he ended up selling it to a bigger drug treatment center, and he's down in Texas now. But yeah, it was. But this guy, the person that we put in there, helped them get to that point and help them successfully sell to a bigger company for sure.
So you were working with Kahala for a while, right?
We've done some work with Kahala before. Okay. Yeah, actually, Cold Stone before it was Kahala.
That's what I thought. Okay, Cold Stone. So when you guys started doing, when you started looking at like your business plan for Y Scouts, did you know that it was going to be all C-suite people, or wasn't it attorneys and stuff like that as well, or like what was like? Did you have like a target audience right away?
No. The interesting thing with Y Scouts from an industry perspective, and this is a really great question, is we didn't want to specialize in any traditional industry, because that's what traditional search firms do, is they go find a role, a functional area, and then an industry, and then they just go deep in that area. Well, at the time, our purpose was to really go identify companies that had a lot of purpose and meaning, and we didn't see a large concentration in any one industry. So we were like, well, we're not going to focus on one industry then. Let's just go after companies that are purpose and values driven. And so we really set out with really no practice area, we didn't know where it was going to lead. So that was kind of how we kind of started things.
And now you're just primarily focusing on C-suite.
Oh, yes. And then I forgot your question. Sorry.
No, that's it.
No.
You answered the question.
No, I've got a better answer for that.
Okay.
We actually, when we started it, we were like, hey, we're a purpose-based recruiting firm. Yeah. Well, whatever company needs these roles filled. And so we have the process that we still use today, which we can get into or not. It's super important. I love it, and it's what makes Y Scouts what it is today. But when we executed the process with any roles that were less than 100K, it was too long, drawn out, and it didn't make sense. It didn't make sense for our client. It didn't make sense for us. We didn't make enough money off it. It was just too big of a lift.
Yeah.
So that was really early on. That was like in the first few roles I think that we worked, and we right away were like, we got to do leadership only. So we went from purpose-based recruiting to purpose-based leadership search like almost overnight, because we knew the process was just too much of a heavy lift for lower level roles.
So let's get into that a little bit, your process. But before we do that, why don't we break it up a little bit? So Tricia, why don't you ask one of these rapid fires?
What's the first thing you do in the morning when you get up?
I immediately go work out. So, I mean, I literally have my clothes laid out. I brush my teeth, put my clothes on, and get out the door and get to the gym. So usually about 5 a.m.
And you also have, you do more than just lift, right? Your yoga and...
Yeah. I mean, a perfect week for me would be every time I lift, I do interval sprinting. is like the, I don't know, kind of the cheat to like doing quick cardio
yeah.
that without, killing yourself, is like sprint for 30 seconds, stop for 30 seconds. And then I always do like kind of a HIIT workout where I'm moving from station to station pretty quick. So I'm burning calories there. And then I like to do a Murph at least once a week, which is
The CrossFit?
CrossFit,
it's
CrossFit people just went so crazy.
Yeah.
They're so exciting.
I time it. I only do it. It takes me 40 minutes. Is like kind of really good for me, which that's not great for a lot of
So
people.
you do that once a week?
Yeah, it's 2 miles. It's 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, and 300 squats. So I do that once a week just to kind of test where I'm at. And then a perfect week would be finishing off at yoga, or I just start lifting again. And so I usually lift about 5 times a week, or work out 5 times a week.
So before we get back into the meat and potatoes of this whole thing, let's talk a little bit about the fitness side of things, because do you think that it's become way easier for you to stay focused and always stay on your routines and stuff because you live with somebody who is also doing the same things as you?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, especially somebody that does it at the level that Bryna does it at.
Yeah.
I
right.
mean, it's intimidating just being
Right.
a husband, the
Right.
way she works out.
Right.
But
and
yeah, that
eats, and I mean the diet and food, and
we do red light every morning. I mean, she was more religious than I was, but over the last 3 or 4 weeks, I've been doing it every day too.
Can you explain for people who don't know what that is? Can you explain what red light is?
Red light therapy. You can look it up because it's there's a lot of stuff about it, but it basically helps your cells basically regenerate faster. So it will help like scarring. It'll help you heal faster, but overall it'll help like muscles and repair themselves faster. And there's a lot of other benefits.
So what does that look like when you're doing red light?
You stand naked. It's not even a bed. They make beds too, but ours is this panel. So you just stand there naked, like 6 inches from this like panel that's red lights, and then there's some lights that don't have any color, but also are good for you as well. But yeah,
for how long?
10 minutes aside. So it's like you're cooking a burger, but it's 10 minutes aside. So we do that, and then yes, it makes it easier. I'd say when it comes to workout, I remember I'd mentioned this to Trish. When I look back at my career, and maybe this isn't true for everybody, but I look back on my career and my professional life mirrors my fitness life.
Yeah.
So when I was out of shape, a lot of times things weren't going that great. And then as soon as I get focused and I start working out and I get in my routine, for some reason, for me, business takes off and starts going well, and I feel so much better about myself. And that started when I first started Job Brokers. I remember specific times where I was at the gym, like, what am I doing here? I need to be in the office. I grinded because I didn't have kids. I wasn't married. I could work as much as I want, and things weren't going yet. And I was young, and I thought effort would do it. And I made the decision to stay in the gym, and that was probably the best decision I ever made. I probably wouldn't have been successful or wouldn't have made it in business had I not stayed in the gym those few times, because that was the only thing I could control.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you look at most of the successful people that we know, they have a similar routine. I mean, a lot of people that this day and age, we get back to the whole personal development side of things, but like it's mind and body, right? So the same routine, get up, go to the gym, and then you're doing your affirmations and you're meditating, you're journaling, you're doing all it's as much as it might be like it's the routine, really, right? It's like making your bed every day, right? They say if you make your bed every day, your ability to do more that day is going to be astronomical than the people that don't make their bed every day.
100%. It's like, in my mind, I always view that as like habit stacking. Like the more in your life you habit stack, you're going to get that shit done. And routine. Bryna is crazy about routine. Bryna will wake up on a Saturday morning, and I don't want to work out. I want to rest that day. She's like, I'm going to go do a Murph.
Right.
I'm like, oh shit, my wife's going to do a Murph. That means I got to go do a Murph. Otherwise, like, my wife's doing a Murph, I'm not going to do it.
Right.
So I'll end up doing a Murph with her. So there's obviously, those are the positives to having somebody that is routine based and is hardcore
and is hyper focused on that world, and she knows it well.
I mean, thinking about doing I don't know many females that could do 100 pull-ups. I mean, I think she does 5 at a time, or she does 5 at a time, 5 pull-ups.
I don't know many males that could do.
I know. I mean,
5 pull-ups.
It's crazy.
At all.
So that it does help to answer your question. I mean, we're perfect for each other in that way.
Yeah. So before we move on, just one quick story. So we were at ACC last Friday, and we were eating lunch, and Max had chicken breasts and about a pound of broccoli for lunch, and we were eating French dips and,
and having a beer,
club sandwiches and burgers and stuff like that.
Sounds like
and
Tucker.
Our other friend looked at him and he goes, that looks like a serial killer meal. Like that. like it was there was so much on the plate. All right. So anyways, moving on. So let's talk a little bit about your podcast and like what is like the intent for that and how does that work?
Yeah, no, it's good. Honestly, the podcast, Brian Moore started the podcast and then he moved on to Anthem. And he was so good at it that when I started it, I'm like, shit, this is going to be a hard thing. And it's still hard for me.
Yeah.
Even this is kind of hard for me, but because I've been
doing a great job.
Thank you. But because I've been podcasting, I feel much more comfortable. But
Yeah.
if I hadn't been podcasting, I'd be sitting here much more nervous and not as relaxed and not having as good of a conversation. But so Brian Moore started the podcast, the Built on Purpose podcast. If you listen to him, I in fact, we changed the name. It was behind the resume. I had this whole like this thought. And people were like, it was so much better as Built on Purpose. And maybe it's because Brian was doing it. But just to make sure, I switched it back to Built on Purpose. And so he did the first, I don't know, probably 30-something episodes or 40 episodes.
Yeah.
And then I took over. And the purpose of it for us now is we're really getting focused on niche. So I talked about how we didn't really niche. And we are still we still are mostly a generalist search firm.
Right.
We usually work with closely held companies between 50 million and 200 million, but there's bigger companies too. But that's kind of the generally who we work with. But we about 2015, 16, purpose and values became table stakes for every company. So at that point we were like, well, we don't need to be generalists anymore. We can start specializing and become more efficient and more effective in certain practice areas. And 5 years ago, we worked a president role for a cannabis company, and but we absolutely loved it. I mean, we were great at it. The cannabis industry is obviously very much on the forefront. It needs leaders. We view ourselves as a leadership search firm. We're really good at hiring leaders, and there's not an industry out there that doesn't need leaders more than the cannabis industry right now, especially leaders that don't have cannabis because there's really none left to find. So we started to niche and started to do a lot of cannabis. So the podcast, back to full circle, really been focusing it on cannabis. And I didn't really like that at first. Everybody in my office was like, yeah, let's use that as the platform to do cannabis stuff. And I didn't really like it because I've got a lot of interesting friends too. I'd love to have people like you and, just my friends that I can, it'd be more fun for me and definitely more easier than having to review people that live in Italy that, in some cases, and I'm like trying to figure out what to say. But it's actually been pretty rewarding. Like I've learned a lot from these people. I mean, I get, I'm recording it. It's content for everybody else, but I get to learn from these people. I've had some pretty amazing guests as of late from the cannabis industry and as a whole. And Brian did too. Our podcast has a great, a great bunch of guests on it. But now it's been the last probably 10 episodes have been focused purely on cannabis.
So the cannabis industry, you have a question? Oh, okay. So the cannabis industry in general, if you're not a huge company, you were probably started by somebody who knew how to grow cannabis, right? It doesn't mean they know how to run a company at all, right? So you're getting back to like the leadership side of things, right? I think anybody who's dabbled in it, even the guys that I know they're in the business and they're massively successful, will still say that it's a sleazy business right now because it's not up to par of where it should be with the people running everything because it's like a Wild West still.
It is a little like the Wild West. I mean, I'd say where we have done the best work, at least from like our experience, has been with like kind of the top tier, the Green Thumbs and True Leaves and like the bigger companies that everybody knows about. But yes, there are still, I mean, some of the clients that we have, and this one I won't disclose some names here, but in some cases, the cannabis industry was people putting a bunch of money in and owners fighting over who owns what shares. And now that's starting to make money. There were some real fights and stuff that we had to help, sort out along the way. But it's, it's still in the early stages. If it's a 9-inning game, we're in inning 2.5.
Yeah.
So,
and you're working with people like you said, so your guests are people that could be an attorney in the business. It could be somebody who owns a dispensary or a big company.
Yeah, most of them have been founders and presidents, CEOs. But we've also had people like political people. Keith Strope is a perfect example. I didn't even know really who Keith was until I sat on this panel. It's called Normal, and you guys could look this up if you have this much interest in cannabis. But he had been fighting for cannabis users' rights since like the 1970s, and so he'd been doing this stuff for a long time, and so the acceptable rate, like they would send out questionnaires and ask people, who's accepting the cannabis industry. It was like 12%, back in the 70s and 80s. Now it's like 60, 70%.
Right.
I mean, we don't have 60, 70% like agreement on anything in
right.
this entire world, especially
right.
this country. But cannabis we've had some really good guests, and so there's been some amazing ones that have taught me so much about how long this is really going on for. The other thing that has really stuck out at me about cannabis is, and I won't go too far off the wagon here, but socially, like there are people locked up in prison for selling weed, like a plant that you grow out of the ground. I mean, it's so fucked up. Like those people need to be let out of prison. I mean, it is such a fucked up game.
Well, when it does
you're preaching to the choir here.
When it does go federally legal, then that's a whole nother thing, right? There's going to be a lot of people that are going to be right out of the prison system, that's for sure.
Oh, for sure. I mean, there's a company called, and the guy that I just had, that I hosted on the podcast, his name's Andrew D'Angelo. His brother is actually considered the godfather of the cannabis industry. His name's Steven. But he runs a nonprofit called the Last Prisoner Project. Mm-hmm. So there's a serious money going in to getting these people out. I mean, they're mostly brown and black people that are stuck in prison. And imagine, we were talking about this on the podcast. Imagine being stuck in prison for selling weed, which is now legal through COVID. Nobody comes to visit you. You're just sitting in a prison cell, like basically for selling weed that everybody's freely doing now.
Right.
And you're in prison.
And they're opening them up like Circle K's everywhere, but you're in prison because you were selling it out of your car.
Yeah.
And your fellow inmate was in for assault and may have already been
murder.
So it's so crazy. So anyway, my eyes have really been opened up. This is relatively new for me to talk about, kind of publicly, but they have really helped me open it up. We're going to help them help these prisoners, because I think it is a really fucked up thing, especially if you're making money off the industry.
Yeah.
You need to be an activist in some way and help fix the problem.
Oh, for sure. There should be lobbyists like crazy going.
Trey's over here clapping.
Going over there.
Yeah, we call.
Trey's he's not going to prison yet.
Everybody that's in the cannabis industry they should consider themselves an activist.
That's responsible.
Yeah. So anyway,
Hey,
so
wait. What was the last thing you just said?
Everybody in the cannabis industry that's making money off it, they should consider themselves an activist.
Absolutely.
Of some sort to help fix the past, which is so kind of effed up.
That's gonna be a quote, Instagram quote.
There you go.
Just write that. Hey Max, what does it mean to be to have a marijuana certification? I listened to a couple of the podcast episodes, and it's something that, and then you have a blog post. Should your cannabis executives have marijuana certifications? What is that?
It's just talking in general. There's there are certain certifications you can get.
Through the federal government, or
no, they're more like there's a company called Green Flower. I'll give them a plug. We use them for kind of learning. But
shout out Green Flower.
They're just like certifications, like learning certifications. Which is also, it's something new because it was frowned upon for so long that there's not a lot of learning material about how to grow weed, what different all the different types of weed, all the different types of from CBN to CBD to CBG. Like there's over 100 cannabinoids that are that we haven't even touched yet. So
it's kind of like the Oregon organic certification. Something along those lines.
Yeah.
It's like an independent.
It's all independent now. Usually run by the states. But
okay.
So.
All right. Sorry, just curious.
It's all good.
I didn't know that was a thing.
So going back to we kind of like passed up, I think, a really important part, and it was talking about like the foundation behind Y Scouts, and you said we can get into it or we cannot, but I said we should. So let's get into it a little bit. So the whole function and how you guys operate, go into that.
Yeah, so Y Scouts, like I said, we're the first purpose-based leadership search firm on the planet. When we were building the process, a big piece of that was that covert process. It was really to let people come into the process, let leaders come in and authentically go through a discovery process and talk about what it is they want to do, what it is they like to do, who they are as a person, what values they most, what they'd never compromise. And so it's a process to really align people at that cultural level, which is super important in the foundation of everything. And I really think the way we do it is one of the only ways to do it. I won't say the only way, although I haven't seen another way, is I think it's impossible to align somebody to a culture or get to know somebody at the depths that you need to for these leadership roles, if you talk about what they can do for you first. Meaning, like, if we start talking about the role, like, I'm looking for executive recruiters, which I am, by the way. So if you know anybody that is a really good executive recruiter, send them to me.
They can work from home.
They can work from home. They can work from anywhere, actually.
Yeah.
But so we believe that you can never, once you start down that road of me talking what you can do for me, if I wanted you to be an executive recruiter, if I'm like, well, what type of roles do you think you can fill, or what can you do? As soon as we have that conversation, I think it's almost impossible to go back and find out what it is you're really most passionate about and what you want to do and who you are as a person. It's just so weird. Once people have this conversation where you've disclosed what you want to hear, they will always guard it and tell you, have a guarded answer to a certain extent. And I know that sounds, kind of crazy, but I just think it's the best way. It's the only way that we've seen to authentically get to know somebody. You have to have that conversation about who they are and what they want before they have any idea of like what it is, why you're even asking the questions. So
we talked a little bit earlier because, like, let's get into the fact that we're looking for people right now, right? So Stuart and I were asking you questions about, like, what would you suggest we do for hiring people? And we said, make a video, we'll put it on LinkedIn or all the social media platforms. And then we got into this conversation about giving somebody an offer.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah.
Which I thought this was really cool. Like, so just explain what you said to us, because you can say it better than I did.
Yeah. So I think a takeaway that everybody could use, because there's probably people that'll listen to this that are doing hiring in some capacity.
Yeah.
So this isn't just for senior level roles.
Right.
But one thing that we started doing, because before COVID, I know it's hard to remember before COVID, but the market was really tight. I mean, it was similar, not quite like it is now, but it was getting to being an employee or a candidate's market.
Yeah.
So when that started happening, when we recognized what was happening is when we'd give an offer to somebody, and usually because we take them through this process, usually they're bought into the company, they're very aligned. We had people like getting counters that were like double and triple, and we're like, holy shit, this is crazy. Like, what's going on here? So the advice that I'd have, what we started to do and what we still do, and my coach, Sheldon Harris, loves this too, but when we know that we like somebody, and it's most likely we're going to give this person an offer, like it's the one. When you interview people, when you're going to hire somebody, you're like, I love this person. So instead of getting too excited, which we normally do, and we start thinking like business people, and we start to put numbers together, like what am I going to offer them so they'll take it? You can think that in the background, but you never want to disclose the offer. So what you say to the candidate is, you say, aside from comp, on a scale of 1 to 10, how ready are you to accept an offer from us today? And until they're a 9 or 10, you never give them the offer. You talk about the things that are in the gap. So if they say a 6, and they say, "What? Like, why is it a 6? What's in the gap between 6 and 10?" Well, I need to talk to my wife. I don't know about the relo. I have a bonus that's going to be paid. Like, you got to talk about all those things, because if you attack it with money first, and this is what we're talking about, is the person's not going to say, "Hey, this isn't a money issue." Every candidate, it's part of the hiring process and game, especially at the senior level. You're trying to get money. You're trying to get paid a little bit. So it's confused. There's other reasons in the background. So they negotiate you up, which is normally the case, and it's really not even a money issue.
Right.
So it just helps separate the two and keeps it clean, and obviously might save you a couple bucks and really make sure you get to the candidates that really want the job and are deserving. That's
what I was just going to say. I think it takes those people that you'll know pretty quickly if they want the job, because they may go from a 6 to a 9 in like a day.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, I talked to my mom and my sister and my wife, and we're moving, and everything's good, and I'm a 9. So let's roll.
Even playing that out further, you have to, especially in this market, going back to kind of when you guys hire people, you have to also like think through everything that they're going to go through. So they're going to say, you get them to verbally accept, and then you have to even go further beyond that and say, who are you going to tell, and like, what are your next steps? Because you want to basically cut everything off the pass. A lot of times you want to assume they're going to get a counteroffer. You probably wouldn't be hiring them if they weren't good. So you basically say the question, what are you going to do when you get counteroffered by your company when you put in your notice? And so if they don't, most people are pretty honest. When you ask them those questions and you close those things off, then you're set up for success. If you don't close any of those things off, though, in this market, there's a good chance that you're not going to get that person. But a couple other things when it relates to that process, just going back, we always take people through, it's called role visioning. So, even if you're hiring LOs or something that seems like a run-of-the-mill role, well, you still got to go through the process, in my opinion, to define what success looks like in that role right now. Like, what are the 3 things that this person needs to achieve? And even in the more measurable you can make it, the better. Because A players love when they know the game, when they know what they need to achieve, and they know how they're going to do it. So I think that is important. And then, we have a leadership model for hiring. Of course, I'm biased because it's our leadership model for hiring, but we're always looking for relentless learners, people that develop other people well, and then people that drive results, almost like a 3-legged stool. And we look at each one of their roles and evaluate them on those 3 criteria, which helps us evaluate whether or not they are good at what they do or they can do the job.
So say those 3 again. It was lifelong learners.
Relentless learner.
Relentless learner.
Developer of people or developer others.
Mm-hmm.
And then driver of results. And that's the one that kind of pins it in, because there are people that you can meet that love to learn, and there are people that are they care about people.
Yeah.
But there's people that have those 2 things, but they don't drive results, and you see them all the time. And bless their souls, I'd take those 2 things, anytime. But it doesn't, at the end of the day,
It's a business.
Yeah, at the end of the day, and that person's ultimately not going to be happy unless they win, which is, I think, important. In my opinion, winning, feeling like you're winning in business, I think it's the level sets every culture. Okay, who wants to show up and lose at work? You know what I mean? Everybody wants to show up and win. And so, anyway.
It's exhausting, and it's unfortunately the reason why people stick around sometimes in corporate America, because they want to keep the salary, and they know that, they do what they can, and people think they have a great job, but really they don't have a great job. They don't have a great life, really. Right.
Max, do you ever work with HR departments on, what you're saying sounds like not just recruiting, right? But it's like a whole culture thing that for people who are already in jobs.
Yeah.
Organizations would benefit from.
Yeah, we do. We wrote a book, Hiring on Purpose, and it kind of shares, why we decided to build Y Scouts and why it's so important. In fact, the first story in it talks about, and this is kind of a sports analogy, so if they're female listeners, I apologize, but when the Bears
don't watch sports.
Well, not all of them understand.
We're going to cut this part out, dude.
Not all of them understand this, but
okay.
The book starts out with a story about the Bears hiring Jay Cutler. Jay Cutler in Denver was a disaster. He was an asshole. Nobody liked him. Everybody on his team hated him, but the Bears needed a quarterback so bad. And he had such a good arm that they thought they could hire him and everything would be fine. And what happened? He was a disaster. So that's how it
Still a huge fan of Jay Cutler. He's got a great podcast out right now.
Oh, he does? I didn't know that.
I think there's a lot of. I think that a lot of the things that they talked about before this thing came out about him. Sorry, we're going off topic here, but
I didn't answer.
Everybody didn't hate him as much as people thought he did. We thought they did.
Yeah,
his teammates didn't.
He wasn't as bad as like a Ryan. He wasn't as bad as like Ryan Leaf. No. Remember that guy? But
he's also extremely successful.
But he is he?
Yeah, he's huge. He's on NFL Network.
Oh, I think you're right.
Yeah,
I did see that. But to answer your question about HR, I as a practice, and I think everybody in the search world, if you're talking to HR, you're screwed. Like they put up barriers everywhere. And I love HR people. So, but we do share. It's fun to have conversations with HR people. But with the level of work that we are selling, this leadership search roles and senior level roles, sometimes they'll have like a chief people officer or CHRO that is, assigned by the CEO or the board to go find a firm, but not a lot. So, but I do like talking to HR people because they're usually in the trenches dealing with hiring process, and we're nerdy about hiring process and, questions and how we do thys. So, yes, we do share a lot of best practices, but they,
it's not really for that title, for those titles.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. One of the roles that we do like handling is like the chief people officer role, because it's changed so much from just traditional leadership. Traditional HR is like a paper pusher and does payroll, deals with insurance, does all that. Well, that's administrative HR. The new HR person that crushes it is the one that actually develops the culture, is the right hand person to the CEO or the president, and really helping do things that matter. Like the right chief people officer, the VP of HR, whatever the highest ranking person in HR, they should be able to tell you how they affect the bottom line. If they can't, they're more of this person off on the side, putting up barriers and just helping people, on the side. So that might be simplifying a little too much, but I mean, it's a very good way of putting it, that great chief people officers, they literally affect the bottom line.
So, for example, we did request with our HR to put out an ad for some positions. And I asked, I was like, well, how does this work? And she's like, well, we just do the ad and then it goes out into like all the job boards.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, I feel like, my mind, obviously I'm going, okay, we're going to get a lot of people that'll probably reach out. But for us, everybody that's been really effective with us, it's through a relationship.
Yeah.
Right. Somebody we know. It's a friend, a family, a friend of a friend. It's, somebody within the business that I might know. And it seems to work very nicely for this sort of situation. Obviously, when you're getting into these massive corporations and stuff, that's not how you go find a new CEO or CFO or CPO or CDO.
And you can. I mean, people still effectively do it. I mean, your internal network and getting referred to people is still super valuable, but sometimes it can get you into trouble too.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you have a big role open and you get referred to somebody and you don't have a process going, you kind of don't get you'll never know if there was somebody better out there to compare them to. So anyway, that's part of
it makes sense.
But it's still, I will never, being in the recruiting business, I will never refute that using your personal network to hiring is like, it's vital. Like, and if you're not good at that, it's going to be hard to run your business.
Right. I think one difficult part about that though is it's like the interviewing process, right? Do you have a structure and a system, a process of actually doing the interviews, the actual structure of hiring? Because when you start hiring for your friends and your family and everything, it's pretty much like, hey, do you want to do this? This is what you do. This is what we're going to do.
Have you ever actually interviewed people here? I mean, like, it seems like everybody has come in through like a personal deal.
It depends, right? So, for example, we interviewed somebody the other day, and Jeremy and I interviewed somebody for a role on our operations side of our team, and we just kind of like, ham and egged it, and he's from Chase Bank, 18 years, right? And I'm just like listening to him, like it sounds like he's asking some questions, and I'm like thinking is like corporate America, my world, right? And I'm over there going, okay, there's a little bit I think we can learn from each other through these processes, because maybe I'm a little bit, my questions are different, but he had some things that he was asking that were very relevant.
Yeah,
to what was going on, and maybe I would have not done, but we have some work to do for sure. And I thought about that as I walked out of this going, okay, we need to have like a plan, right? Something a little bit better than this as we go forward, but it was a friend.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I will say part of our process, going back to that, is we always produce an interview guide for our client. Because interviewing is all about listening. And quite frankly, I had to learn through being in the recruiting business and hiring business forever that I'm not that great of an interviewer naturally, because I like to talk. And interviewing is about asking questions and sitting back and listening and discerning and vetting. And so if you don't have a plan and you're a talker, which you're probably not as bad as me. I'm just judging because I've known you for so long. I think you've listened pretty well. But I mean, good. I think you definitely have to have questions. Like don't be thinking about what you're going to ask next. Be intentional about knowing what your question is going to be. And then when we hire for people, inevitably most big companies, they have an internal referral. And one of the things that we bring to the table in all search firms, I'll just throw it out there, is we create a measuring stick that we put everybody against. So when the CEO's best friend wants to be referred for the job, instead of the CEO telling them of the client that we're working with that, hey, we're not going to hire you, it gets passed off to us, so we can kind of measure them up and say, hey, objectively, you didn't get the job. Right. So that a lot of times, that's why a lot of people hire search firms, is so they don't have that uncomfortableness. Because a lot of times you want that relationship after. You want it to be weird because you didn't hire them. You basically turned them down. But
so as we wrap this up, because I think we're getting close to an hour here, what are some other things, just briefly, that you got going on right now besides Y Scouts? I know you get your hands in a few other things, and you can talk about it or not talk about it.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's one thing, and I don't spend an awful lot of time in it, but we have a supplement business that my wife and I are involved in, and it's kind of her background, but it's called Human Elements. And it's with Dr. Jason Kolber, who is just a stud. He'd actually be a great guy to have on your podcast.
Ooh.
I mean, talk about a guy that knows like he'll talk
All right,
about
we'll get his contact information.
talk about the nervous system. I mean, he's treated the top 400 baseball players, the top 300 to 400 golfers. I mean, this guy
Jason Kolber.
Dr. Jason Kolber, he works for the Diamondbacks. He's a
Okay.
performance specialist for the Diamondbacks, and then he has a practice. He also works for the Coyotes now, but he's got some
What kind of
incredible
doctor
stories.
is he?
He'll say like a naturopath.
Okay.
Like he's never taken a aspirin in his life. He doesn't really drink, and he's amazing
off.
though. You gotta get it. He's amazing.
No.
He's like Yoda. There's just something about
Yeah.
him. So anyway,
That's cool.
we work with him, and we have 2 products now. There's 5 that are slated to come out, but one's for sleep. It's called Refresh.
Which I
Hemodynamics
need
Refresh.
that back. I
Same.
left it at your house. I
And
need
then
that.
there's one for focus. It's a neurotropic, so it really helps you stay focused, and it works. And it's all natural ingredients. So one thing that we do is it's NSF Sport approved, which is the highest independent third party that can certify something. So professional athletes we sell it to a lot of professional baseball teams, and then it's also sold to the U.S. swimming team, a bunch of colleges,
Right.
The X Games, all those types of things. So it's a very high performance,
Right.
very clean.
Something that's not going to show up on a test
Exactly.
and say, wait, what was this?
Well, that's funny. The NSF, that's what they do. They not only test what's in it, they also are able to tell you what's not in it, because you will come up positive on a drug test for, the Olympic level if there's something, even though it's not illegal, but
Yeah.
if it's a substance that they can't identify what it is. So anyway, so that's
Yeah.
what we have going on. I mean, I take both formulas every day.
Yeah.
I love them, and they're all natural. So
Yeah.
Well,
I have a bottle that I left on your counter at the bar that Brandon gave me. That
I know
you
where
get
to find. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, I have a packet. It's called an AM/PM stack. I'll give you guys both one too.
Thank you. We both have sleep issues.
Yeah, it's people swear by it. Now, if somebody's taking, let me clear, if somebody's taking a bar of Xanax and they think that replacing it with a natural sleep formula is going to fix that, then you might have a little longer road to go down. But if you legitimately aren't taking something, a prescription that is super powerful that knocks you out, it will definitely help. It's got 10 different ingredients in it. Kind of helps you go to sleep and then helps you stay asleep. So I wear an Oura ring. I've been tracking it. It has a really positive effect on your HRV, which is
what is
heart
that?
rate variability, which is in extreme athletes, when their heart rate variability goes up, that means if you're an Ironman, that means you can run so much further and swim so much further and bike so much further. So we're seeing this trend with people that are measuring with Oura rings. So if you have an Oura
I've never
ring,
even
take it.
heard of that.
I haven't
Really?
either.
No.
Oh, man,
I mean, I know
it's-
everybody's wearing the
Whoop, man.
the Whoop bands, and you saw the guys in the Ryder Cup wearing them. And Justin Thomas, when he got up to first tee shot, I think on the last day of the match play, he was at 186, and his natural resting's 85.
Did you see those guys pounding beers before they teed off? That was crazy.
Cool. That was cool.
But I swear by the ring. I mean, it does the same thing as a Whoop. So and last night, for some reason, I didn't sleep that great. I only score in the 70s. My wife, she's in the 80s all the time. And it's she shows we get in bed at the same time, and she scores 10 points higher than me. But it's super accurate.
So it measures your heart rate variability.
Well, that's one of the things. It measures your readiness. So it measures your sleep is the most thing. It does everything that an Apple Watch.
Okay.
Your Apple Watch does calories.
Mm-hmm.
Your Oura Ring will evaluate how much you're resting and how you sleep, and it'll rest light sleep, deep sleep, REM sleep. All those things. How much you move during the night, and then it gives you ultimately gives you a sleep score that rules your life. You wake up what was my sleep score?
Is there a bracelet too, or is it just a ring?
The Oura Ring's just a ring,
Damn.
but it's much better than a bracelet. I mean,
Not for me.
that's true.
I don't wear rings. Yeah, we're gonna probably cut that part.
Yeah.
Right. Here, I'll mark that. Yeah.
Marked.
So yeah, that's too funny. All right, so I wouldn't normally do this, but I'm just going to bring this up real quick because our next guest today, even though we're doing 2 today, everybody out there, is Jason Plotke. of
Oh, he is?
Apex.
Okay, yeah.
So I met Jason through Max because Max was a member out at Apex Motorsports.
Oh, that's how you met?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I
So-
mean, I am. not nearly into cars like these guys or into racing like these guys, but man, there's just something about taking a car and driving it super hard. I only need about 30 minutes of doing it, and then I'm good for the day.
Yeah.
But it is an awesome experience to just go drive a car as fast as you can around a track. I mean, you're like, you could die at any minute, but you're, kind of keeping it on the road. So there's just something about it, about taking a car out on a track and running it. So it'll be fun. I'll listen to his. I look forward to hearing what he says about the business, because it's interesting.
I'm curious about it too, because we haven't gotten deep with him yet. But all right, two things. What's like when people ask you what your why is? What do you say?
My why is to help others better succeed in life, and that manifested from my purpose. I used to think, honestly, that I was supposed to be a coach. Like, I thought I was going to make a bunch of money and then go coach sports.
Yeah.
And through this long process that I went through one time with this guy, he's like, can't you just do that in business? Like, I thought I was going to go help people get better in sports. But I started to figure out that, like, what I thrive on when I'm really at my best is to help others better succeed in life. And I get to do that at Y Scouts. We do senior level hires. If you ask any CEO or president, like, their biggest challenge in their life or their biggest issue in their life, if they need like a C-level role filled, that is the biggest challenge or issue that they have going on in their life by far. So when you can help them do that, help them build their business, it frees them up and helps them better succeed and live the life they want.
That's awesome. I did it recently too, and mine was to create opportunities for others to achieve more in their life.
Yeah, so, it's very similar. I think naturally, and I say this very humbly, but there's something about naturally I just connect people. Like, even for free, I do it all the time.
Yeah.
Like, I meet somebody, I'm like, hey, I'll just introduce them. I think actually Stuart, I remember.
Yeah.
I ended up.
You came up in the very first episode we recorded.
Oh, really? Okay.
He's already told us the story. They were in the same apartment.
We ended up, went out one night and ended up in the same place. And he told me, he was just graduating from ASU. I'm like, what are you going to do? And I obviously knew Jay. And he didn't know, and I'm like, well, let me introduce you to these guys in the mortgage business, and so that was a good introduction. I think Parnell was kind of the similar way, but it's just it's fun for me. I think anybody in our space, if you don't naturally have that wire and you're not connecting the dots, then you're probably not cut out to.
I mean, I think that's super important in every business. If you're not willing to connect people and give people at least like a network to go to. I mean, I get called for everything all the time, whether it be a plumber or a job, right? Or whatever, right? And so I think everybody I know that's successful kind of does that.
Yeah, there's a guy, Jonathan Kaiser, if you've met Kaiser.
Oh,
I mean, he's wrote a book. I think it's called Selfless Service, but and that's what we're talking about. It's like, you just kind of take take the angle that if I help enough people, they're going to help me. And I think, obviously that holds true in life. But it's a selfless service model. It's like you're helping people, and that's what's made you so successful, and being able to bring so many people over here, and why you get so much business at
And
VOP.
Jonathan gave me that book, by the way.
He did?
Yeah. First time I met him.
I like Jonathan.
He's a nice guy. Super nice guy.
Who's Jonathan?
He owns Kaiser Commercial, right?
Kaiser.
It's
just called Kaiser.
It's commercial real estate company.
Got it.
But he changed like the whole model.
They represent the tenant.
Yeah.
So they basically...
What?
They
I've never
represent
heard of
just
such a
tenant.
thing.
There's some other companies that do it, but he'd be great to have on the podcast too.
Yeah.
He's interesting. I mean,
he is very interesting. I know he ruffled a lot of feathers when he decided to go do it this model, and people were like, "You're messing up with our commission checks."
Oh man, I've always liked him because we co-office together.
Yeah.
But people either love him, or then there's been a couple people in the past that just don't get him. And you know what? He's like, "Fuck those people. I don't care about those." people.
He's successful.
Yeah,
he made it work, man.
Yeah.
All right, so the last question we usually ask is, and we haven't been doing a very good job of this, was I stole this from I Am Athlete. If you're not watching I Am Athlete, you should. Dude, Brandon Marshall, Fred Taylor, no? Chad Johnson?
I know who those guys are, yes.
Yes,
but
I know,
I haven't
but
watched
you
it.
haven't seen this? Oh, it's so good. Anyways, at the very end, they ask, who would you suggest that we have on the podcast? But you already said it. Do you have anybody else besides him? What was his name again? You wrote down, Trish?
Jason Colbert, Dr. Jason Colbert.
Jason Colbert.
Yeah, I mean, just because he's going to give so much practical advice of like what's going to help you be better in life.
Yeah.
And his career is fascinating. Like he was treating like the most famous athletes in the closets of clubhouses, and because he was a naturopath, and some of these baseball teams didn't believe in that. So Poppy and like stuff like that, he's in a closet treating them for the White Sox back in the run back in the days. But he's got some good stories. I think Jonathan Kaiser would be good. I'm trying to think who else. I mean, I talked about this, and we could cut this out, but I think my brother would be good too. I've never really heard him tell his story.
Dude, I would love to have your brother on here, and I've actually thought about that quite a bit. If we don't cut this out, it's Sam Hansen with he is with Lone Depot right now, but he's in Encinitas, and he absolutely crushes it.
Yeah,
just a great guy.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think his story about just if people are interested in the mortgage,
Yeah.
especially with how the business is going now, it's fascinating. I mean, he was working for Charter Funding. What was their bank in Tucson? Charter Funding. Anyway, he was basically the VP of Ops over like
Magnus?
First Magnus.
First Magnus.
And they, back in 2008 or 7, they were not, they weren't intentionally doing this, of course, but they were not backing their loans, and they were selling them to Countrywide. And that is really what started the crash in 2008. And so he basically had to start over. He lost all his money, had to start over.
So that's a good person. We won't go too deep into him, but we'll start with the fight, though. All right, dude. So thanks for coming on. Again, Max Hansen with Y Scouts. I think it went pretty well, Max.
This was really good.
Oh, thank
Max
you
is
guys.
smarter than I thought he was.
You know what?
I know. I still think of like the 18-year-old that I met.
I'm not joking. This is the most legit setup in here ever. Like at first, I wasn't really comfortable because I don't wear headsets, but once we got going here, Trish and Trey are crushing this. This room is amazing.
Oh, thanks, Max.
Yeah, he needs a raise. He should needs to get paid.
Shit.
Anyways, he's been paid. Again, so thank you to VIP Mortgage for allowing us to have this here. Trisha, thank you so much. Trey, thank you.
You're welcome.
And again, we are a mortgage company. So if you're looking for a mortgage purchase or refinance, you can reach me on any of my social media platforms, Ryan Madrid, and Real Talk with Ryan Madrid. Again, though, this is being put on video and audio, so it's on YouTube. So please like and subscribe. Share this for us. Get the little bell so you can get notified when the podcast is released. Go to our Spotify, Apple iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. We're on everything, but we need the support in order to keep this going. So please share with your friends. And again, thanks, Max. Appreciate it. And we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
VIP Mortgage Incorporated does business in accordance with the Federal Fair Lending Laws, NMLS ID 145502. For state-specific licensing, please visit www.vipmtginc.com/national-licenses/. VIP is not acting on behalf of or at the direction of the FHA, HUD, or the federal government. VIP is an equal housing lender.